Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the COVID-19 New Crisis, Same Story series. In episode 2, we heard from nonprofit leaders across the country focused on disrupting racial economic inequality by creating solutions to improve outcomes in the social, economic, and political systems that dictate the social determinants of health. More of their voices and experiences are captured in our new report, COVID-19 New Crisis, Same Stories, highlighting the innovations to racial economic inequality from leaders of color. In today's episode, we are focusing on unemployment. The third episode in the Racial Economic Equity series introduces community leaders in Des Moines and Dallas and Miami who are working to disrupt racial economic inequality by pivoting their service delivery to equip people with the skills and support needed to thrive in the workforce and challenging the systems that inhibit their access to opportunity. Today's episode, we will review how COVID-19 has magnified the crisis of economic disparity. We'll highlight the realities of workforce development service providers working to address unemployment and underemployment during the current pandemic. Lastly, we'll close by discussing solutions and interventions targeted to disrupt structures and systems that create racial economic inequality. Today, I am joined by my colleague, Cherise Davis, who will be moderating today's discussion. She is the program manager on the Racial Wealth Divide Initiative team at Prosperity Now. We're also joined by Marvin DeGier, who is the director of Evelyn K. Davis Center for Working Families. We're joined by Sheila Marks Jalavet, who is the chief executive officer for Inspiring Tomorrow's Leaders. Lastly, we're joined by Maria Cotto, who is the executive director of Partners for Self-Employment. And with that, I will turn things over to Cherise to get us started with today's conversation.
Thank you, Tupa. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the employment crisis that has been magnified by the COVID-19 pandemic. Recently, headlines celebrated a decline in the country's unemployment rate while ignoring the fact that the unemployment rate for Black workers has continued to increase and the rate for Latino workers reached a historic high in May of 2020. This highlights the economic inequality that continues to exist for people and communities of color and demonstrates a continuing pattern of developing workforce recovery efforts that ignore racial disparities and fail to address systemic barriers such as occupational segregation and employment discrimination. In the weeks since the start of the pandemic, over 40 million people have filed unemployment claims, and with many CARES Act benefits and protections slated to end this month, they are now at risk of being unable to cover necessary living expenses such as food and housing. PPP loans were designed to support small business owners, but according to a Forbes study, only 12% of Black and Latino applicants have been approved for their loans. The program received billions of dollars of funding, but loans of only $50,000 or less were denied due to the racist structure of our credit and banking systems. Small businesses of color are one of the largest employers of people of color, and having lost revenue and been denied loans or other forms of support, they are now at risk of losing this asset in the communities and further destabilizing their local economy. We know that the loss of income that results from unemployment and underemployment prohibits communities from building or growing assets and developing sustainable opportunities for wealth. In response, our leaders are developing new community partnerships to address systemic barriers and discovering unique ways to shift program funding to ensure that their clients have the proper support so they can get and stay employed as COVID-19 restrictions begin to ease. I want to welcome our guests today and thank them for sharing this time to discuss the important work that they're doing in their communities. We'll get started with Marvin. Can you share a bit about what you're seeing in Des Moines, how you've adapted to working in a virtual environment, and how you've been identifying and responding to changing community needs?
Thank you, Cherise. Again, my name is Marvin DeGier. I'm the director for the Evelyn K. Davis Center for Working Families. And so the Evelyn K. Davis Center is an entity that was actually created by Des Moines Area Community College, United Way, Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines, and various community leaders and community-based organizations to address these workforce disparities that we already knew existed. I also serve on another entity called the Directors Council. And so what we were able to do even before this pandemic was to make these disparities plain and clear by commissioning a report with the state public policy group and really highlight the disparities in a quantitative and qualitative format to really create a baseline to understand where we were starting at even just 3 years ago. So here we are today, and in the midst of the pandemic, we've also had to now adjust our services that we were already holding for our clients, and we had to switch it to a virtual and over the phone basis and try to respond immediately to the needs of our clients who typically walk in on a walk-in basis, some set appointments, but it's always changing and moving. So what we did, we saw about a week in advance or two of what was coming, and we started to make a contingency plan, and sure enough, it became the real plan. And so we've been able to serve clients still, like I said, via the phone or blended web services. But what we realized most immediate, and I think a lot of us already know, is our clients were already challenged with technology and different aspects of it. And so we already were the space for our clients to use their computers, our computer center, and just have access to technology in the first place. And so now that we have them over the phone, we see even more challenges, just even simply applying for unemployment in the first place. And also combined with some of our small businesses that we worked with. Through that same report, we started to do pilots, and we created these small business workshops for small business and smaller nonprofits. And in the midst of the pandemic, we saw how they struggled. We led them to different resources and being able to apply for these things. But we saw that there was a lag. There was typically a lag of about 30 to 45 days for our clients and others in different minority communities to be able to even respond to some of the deadlines that states and the federal government put in place so quickly. So we were part of an initiative to come together with 12 other organizations that serve other minority communities throughout the state. And through that, we created the Iowa Small Business Relief Fund to address some of these disparities that we knew would exist from even before the applications even started to get submitted. We already knew that our small businesses were not going to get this funding. So we pivoted very quickly, and we're able to, up to this point, we've raised about $200,000 to help small businesses, minorities, specifically small businesses throughout the state. So now we move, and we're continuing to try to figure out what we can do. There has been one silver lining, I guess, through this space. We've seen a high uptick in some of our moderate to upper middle class individuals coming in and inquiring about our services, particularly our financial coaches. So what we do know is we know things must be hard for them to actually come and start trying to figure this out. We know then that the impacts, we won't really know the impacts of the full impacts of everything until we had the opportunity to open up due to just the fact that so many of our clients walk in and are constantly on the go. So in the midst of that, we're just really trying to make sure long-term that we have better access for our clients, whether it's if we do go to some sort of actual face-to-face or hybrid mix of services, that we continue to have these opportunities for even those like middle moderate individuals to maybe access even in the virtual space, because they realize, I think now as well, that they need help, and we've been able to adjust and adapt to that. We also know the workforce is going to be impacted. We already knew in Polk County from our report that we had a disparity of 4 to 5 times as far as higher unemployment rate for African Americans, specifically in this community. We know that that number is going to increase. So we've had to adjust and shift and make sure that we start planning now. We can't wait until things start to reopen all the way or stay open or get closed again. We have to start now figuring out how do we make sure that our clients still have access to opportunities for employment and be able to earn a livable wage and take care of their families. So again, we're not, it's always changing. Even now as we begin to plan for the fall, because we are technically a part of community college as well. We're still trying to make sure our clients get access to those training opportunities and really start to understand what new jobs may look like. I know I talked about, I guess, breaking this down into thirds, that really the reality is a third of the workforce is not going back to the same job they had. A third of them are never going back to the office. So what we're trying to figure out right here and now is what kind of opportunities can we lead our clients to be successful and have an opportunity to build from. So really, I would just say that regardless of whatever you're doing and wherever you're at, as you start to think about how to address these things, really making policy changes that have long-term impacts to already address what we know has been systemic racism for a long time, and these disparities haven't just popped up overnight, but we do know they're going to get worse. And then also thinking about what kind of investments on a large scale that we can have to really have substantial long-term impact that we need to make sure we get this thing turned around and headed back in the right direction.
Thank you for sharing that, Marvin. What really resonated with me was what you said about the ability to reach an expanded client base, meaning that people are trying to create their opportunities to further their employment and economic mobility, and also not knowing the long-term impacts of the pandemic until recovery is well underway. I know we saw something very similar with the recovery of the Great Recession a few years ago, where the specific needs of people of color were not catered to in recovery efforts. So I love that you all are being proactive in creating these opportunities for your local community. With that, I want to turn to Sheila. I think Marvin touched on something that you can resonate with, which is the challenge that exists when there's a significant lack of access to technology in certain areas that you serve, which hinders the ability for clients to take part in your programming and services now that we're all in a virtual environment. Can I hear more about what's happening with you in Dallas, what the data is showing you, and how your organization has been responding to ensure that opportunity is available to all?
Yes, thank you, Sharice. 63% of the new jobs that were added to the economy in the last decade have been jobs with a medium income of below $50,000, according to the Texas Tribune. Our efforts in inspiring tomorrow's leaders is to mitigate the wealth divide by ingrained in the pillars of the social determinants of health, many of which were amplified as a result of COVID-19. It's important for individuals to see collectively the link between the 6 needs and our ability to thrive. Communities of color were already operating at a financial deficit pre-pandemic, as Pew Research Center reported that white households accounted for 95% of upper medium income households in the DFW statistical area, although they only represented 50% of the territory's population. As a contrast, communities of color make up 50% of the DFW population, only representing 5% of upper middle income households and 83% of lower income households. These statistics reiterate why it's so important for inspiring tomorrow's leaders to propel our goal to identify hidden talent in the community to align clients with living wage jobs. The Dallas minimum wage is about $7.25 per hour as compared to a requirement of $23 per hour to meet the living wage standard of one individuals. So we partner with employers to predetermine competency requirements, train to those skills, and then circle back to the employers with talent possessing the aptitude for placement. We recruit the individuals, customize the training, and equip, skill up, and prepare the hidden talent with the technical and essential skills required for certifications and jobs, ultimately arming our clients so that they're ready for job placement at the end of the cycle. Job recovery post-pandemic will be extremely difficult for our marginalized communities. As a fact, in Texas, as of June 19th, the total job postings had decreased 16% as compared to January 2020. We knew that waiting to deliver our service in the traditional way would hinder our ability to move our clients to their new norm. With every major challenge becomes an opportunity for change, and we traditionally delivered services in a leader-led, in-person environment. However, our long-term strategy was to enhance our service offering to a virtual model. COVID-19 created an immediate pivot as we launched our first remote training class in April. And this tactic required significant dependency on logistics and technology. There were several challenges that we had to overcome in terms of how we got the training materials to individuals in a safe way and ensuring that the individuals had access to technology in order to join the classes. And so we partnered with organizations to offer device loans, and some of our clients even parked at public Wi-Fi locations in order for them to get access to the class. To date, 56% of our first virtual class participants are certified. 60% of those have been placed in jobs with an hourly wage of $15 per hour plus commission, and the remainder in the pipeline. Our pivot was to leverage technology in a unique way so that being in person would not hinder the ability to move forward with education. We uncovered a broader way to deliver service even to those who were underemployed, most of which worked during the day and didn't have the ability to attend our training. But now we have an ability to deliver the training after hours to them, which will broaden our ability to provide impact in the community. One final thing is that the pandemic would also create longer test cycles as our vendors adjusted their plans so that they could react to the COVID preparedness. Therefore, we were faced with a challenge with keeping our clients motivated and focused so that they would continue to study toward the class. And we decided to implement stipend payments. It was the first time we've ever done that, but we offered individuals who continued to study to their test date stipend payments. And this tactic has proved to be really advantageous for our clients. So we are seeking additional funding, or we will be seeking additional funding to continue that process. So one final thing that I want to say to you as a whole, we had some great funders who stepped up to mobilize our plan. North Texas Cares, United Way, Truist, Wells Fargo, Heritage Giving Fund, and many others supported our efforts to move forward, specifically with operational dollars and non-restricted funds. And so as we move forward with our strategy, the two things that we will continue to ask for support with is, number one, having a seat at the table of some of the larger funding nonprofits here in the Dallas area so that we can help in the decision making of distributing capital throughout the city to smaller nonprofits. And then the other ask would be to continue to support our programming with both non-restricted and programming dollars.
Thank you, Sheila. It's inspiring to hear that you're continuing to innovate to ensure that clients are not becoming discouraged in the face of additional unexpected obstacles in their employment journey, and that you guys are going above and beyond to make sure that they are able to access the services that you're offering. One of the things that both you and Marvin addressed was the ability to offer expanded services to address not only unemployment, but underemployment. The leap in unemployment claims indicates that there are many people who have talents and skills that are being underutilized in low-wage work. And so it's great that you all are creating avenues that will allow them not only to secure employment, but to make sure there's opportunity for mobility, and are pushing to ensure the standard of a living rather than a minimum wage. Maria, this is also something that you've identified as trying to address in your work. You've noted that the challenge of underemployment has motivated people to turn to entrepreneurship in an effort to create their own opportunity. Can you share more about what you're seeing in Miami, what's reflected in the data, and how you're working in support of entrepreneurs of color?
Yes, thank you. One of the things that we've consistently seen is data that is showing that the unemployment rate has historically been very low. What those unemployment or employment statistics don't show is that our communities of color tend to be underemployed. Even those individuals that are working a full-time job are underpaid in that full-time job, and therefore we consider them as underemployed. And this leads to several issues, not the least of which is the large gap in wealth building opportunities that our minority communities have. So we've really concentrated through our CDFI and our technical assistance and training programs. We've really worked towards helping individuals to create their own opportunities. So we do that through opportunities for individuals to start small businesses, for individuals to take a small business that they may already be running and expand that small business to create additional jobs or to increase their own income. And through that ability or opportunity for individuals to increase their income and become more seasonally employed, we're really also affecting generational wealth, and we're using these as opportunities to create that wealth. So we see historically that in white families, Individuals are able to make larger investments in their children's education. They're able to set their children up, as they start out in life. So we see that the wealth gap specifically. So a lot of our programs really address the wage gap, and that's very, very important. But the wealth gap is something else that we really need to look at and concentrate on if we're really going to move our communities of color into more sustainable living opportunities. So we really work towards that creation of wealth that can be passed on generationally. We've noted in studies that most communities of color create wealth either through the purchase of a home or through the creation or expansion of a small business. And we've chosen to concentrate on the small business expansion part of that. So our CDFI allows us to do our own lending. So we're able to lend no credit, no collateral lending for individuals who are committed to going through the training and technical assistance programs to learn how to operate a small business appropriately. Those programs are also designed to help individuals kind of find their own hidden talents and create opportunities for income around those talents. We also invest a lot of time and energy into training individuals to become bankable so that they can go through mainstream banking, as well as compete in what is our larger small business economy. The underemployment, I think, issue in South Florida is really exacerbated by the fact that most of our lower wage jobs are hospitality, tourism, restaurant work, and that's really what we have in South Florida. Our big commodity is the sun and the sea. So COVID-19 has done no favors for our already minority communities that are the ones that tend to be working these jobs. So we've really looked at this as an opportunity to help those individuals that very quickly became unemployed due to no fault of their own, because these low wage jobs just did not allow for them to stay on payroll while they had to stay home. And our local economy basically shut down as it did in most parts of the U.S. So we've really looked at this as an opportunity to take individuals, put them through our training and technical assistance program, kind of accelerate their progress in that program, because for a lot of individuals, they were doing this kind of a slower pace after hours while they weren't working. So we really looked at it as an opportunity to take our programming, completely shift it to a online training program. And we had to do some training, of course, on getting individuals to understand the technology platforms and how to use what they already had available. So most individuals have a smartphone. Not everybody knows how to use it to its full capacity or didn't. We invest a lot of time in doing that. So we really used it as an opportunity to increase their training, their technical assistance, and help them increase their businesses and become more relevant in this environment. So we've spent quite a bit of time and are continuing to do just that in looking at businesses and helping them determine how they can take what they're already doing and becoming essential in this new environment. So individuals that were previously doing things like pressure cleaning or sanitation or cleaning or janitorial services, which are very popular in our area, how do you take that and turn it into a business that is essential and demands a higher wage today than it did 3 months ago? So we've done quite a bit of work around that. We also did quite a bit of work around helping individuals to apply for the government programs, so PPP being one of those programs. So at the beginning of the pandemic, when PPP first came out, we invested a lot of time in helping our businesses apply, and what we found was exactly what you illustrated earlier. Our businesses are disproportionately either denied or received such low dollar amounts that they are insignificant to their business. So we've seen dollar amounts as low as $36 in a PPP loan to a small business. Aside from the fact that is incredibly insulting to the small business, it's insulting to the amount of time and effort that we as an organization put into that. So we very quickly realized that PPP was just not designed for the businesses that we choose to serve. And what we've been able to do is to very quickly work with our local county and say to them, we know you got, a little over $450 million in CARES Act money. Our businesses are suffering. Our economy is not going to be able to restart in any significant fashion unless we can save these small businesses from going under. So we've been able to produce a PPP type program that does allow small businesses to use monies for things like back rent, now that the rent moratorium is coming up, back utilities, now that the utility moratorium is going to expire, as well as PPE to protect themselves and their customers. So that particular program really was designed specifically for the minority small business that either was denied PPP or would not have qualified, or simply was so discouraged by the process that they just, they didn't apply. So those are the steps that we're actively taking to really make sure that our communities of color are not only able to survive the pandemic, but are able to thrive during it. And in closing, what I would encourage all individuals, both policymakers, funders, and individuals who are civic-minded and interested, what I would keep in mind is it takes time, energy, and effort in order to keep our programs running. So as far as policies go, we are starting in South Florida, and I'm sure in other parts of the U.S. we're starting to see it, where we're doing enforcement on the new normal, right? What does that look like? PPE, social distancing, and that enforcement is disproportionately happening to our minority small businesses. So we're seeing businesses shut down, we're seeing businesses being fined, but what we're not seeing is the larger businesses being looked at and scrutinized at the same level that our small minority businesses are. And as far as the financial ask, of course, running programs, providing loans, all of that takes capital, but it takes long-term sustainable capital. So this isn't a one and done, which is what a lot of the foundations and government are doing, and we've benefited from that, and we're happy to take your dollar. But if we're really looking at the long-term sustainability of the low-income minority family as a unit, we have to make a long-term investment in their overall success, and that takes long-term capital investment. And I really would encourage those individuals who have the capability to either do that or influence it, to really consider our minority communities as what they are, which is a true asset to our small business community, our local communities, and our individuals.
Thank you for that, Maria. And thank you all for agreeing to share more about yourselves and your work. You've highlighted the importance of digging into data to unmask the racial disparities that exist in the workforce and entrepreneurship systems and have been exacerbated by the crisis we are facing today. These disparities manifest in communities of color and are often incorrectly attributed to poor decision-making or lack of motivation and will, which ignores the history of employment policies and practices that have been designed to keep people out of living wage jobs and opportunities and limit their access to equitable growth. I love that you all have been able to respond quickly to the changing needs in your respective cities, and I agree that direct investments of continued capital and unrestricted funding, in addition to radical policy shifts, will expand the impacts of your efforts and begin to create opportunities for wealth and asset building for families of color. I think your work highlights the value of having people from and of the communities being served at the forefront of solution making and designing interventions that target and dismantle institutions, systems, and practices that stand in the way of racial equity. Thank you again for making the time to have this important conversation. We ask that you all join us for the next episode, airing July 15th, when my colleague will further this dialogue by speaking with leaders of color about the connection between income and racial economic equity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.